Good morning.
Good morning, Terry.
Yeah, good morning. How are you?
Doing well. We're about to start here. I just want to introduce everybody. We have the 2020 Florida Chapter CCIM President, Harry Torres, and he is here to get us started.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start, and I just wanted to say welcome everybody. I could see we have 43 participants. I think 100 or more registered. Hopefully we get them all. But I just wanted to make everybody aware of 4 programs that we should all become experts in, and one is something that we need to do. We don't need to do anything. It has no requirements, and that program is a $1,200 payment per individual, $2,400 per family, and $500 per child. When it was originally announced as part of the CARE Act, they said the checks would be forthcoming in 3 weeks. Now they're saying it may be as long as 6 to 8 weeks, but that will be very helpful to a lot of families, and it has no requirement. You don't need to apply for it. It's based on your tax returns, and the check should come to wherever your address is for your tax return. So be expecting that sometime shortly. I know it'll help every one of us. But the other 3 are important to acquaint yourself with, and the first is the unemployment program. And some of you have businesses with employees, and I want you to become an expert in that program. It's administered by the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity under a website called Connect, and it's $275 a week. And the government of the United States has supplemented it by an additional $600 a week. So become acquainted with that. Keep your employees employed. If not, if you can't keep them employed, help them apply for unemployment insurance. If you're an employee yourself, you can apply, and sole proprietors can also apply. So become acquainted with the Florida Unemployment Program. The second program is the Payroll Protection Plan, the PPP program. And that is a plan that basically you can take 2.5 times your monthly payroll, and you can apply for a loan in that amount. And to the extent that that loan is applied to payroll, rent, mortgages, and other loan expenses, it can be forgiven. So become well acquainted with that, not only for yourselves, but for your clients, because you could advise your clients on these programs as well. And the third program is the economic loan that begins with, it's called EIDL, and you can apply as part of that program for a $10,000 grant, which is forgiven. It doesn't need to be repaid. So if you have a business with immediate financial needs, or you know clients or others who have businesses with immediate financial needs, that's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, EIDL. And it can give you an immediate $10,000 grant. And you can borrow up to $2 million on that, depending on the size of your company. So become absolutely familiar, become an expert on these programs, be able to advise your employees, your associates, and your clients. And actually, this may become something for you in the future that you could do on a fee basis for workarounds. And having said that, I want to be brief because we have Casey Conway with us this morning, and he comes to us really needing no introduction, but very briefly, he's the CCIM Institute chief economist. He's an MAI. He's a CRA. He's the director of research and corporate engagement at the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the University of Alabama's Culverhouse College of Commerce. So having said that, I'm going to give it away to Casey Conway. He's well respected. He's well known to all of us. And we're pleased to have Casey with us once again. Casey?
Great. Thanks, Terry. Is sound good for everybody? Zoom it sounds working. Great. Thank you for those good opening comments and thoughts, Terry. So we got some slides this week to try to help guide through it and give you some takeaways. So we'll jump right in there and advance beyond the cover slide here to the first slide. So this is kind of the setup for this thing I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about Dem Bones, a piece that I wrote last week about, we'll get to it in my third bullet point there, but it's really, if you think about everything that we're doing in the intervention, helping with stimulus and rescue and, being able to stand the economy up, we got to keep in mind that the bones are in disarray right now. And if we don't follow the right sequence of putting them back together, we may not have much of a skeleton of an economy to stand back up. So we'll get into that. Let's advance to the next slide, which is my disclaimer. So this just protects, you guys know I always have them. You've seen these. So these are the Red Shoe Economist crazy ideas today. Don't hold them against anybody or the Institute or University of Alabama if anybody takes offense. So there's my disclaimer. Let's go on to the first slide. Next one. All right, where I want to start, this is a piece I put out last Friday when we got the jobs reports to try to put those in perspective. And I use the rulers analogy, economic rulers and benchmarks made obsolete by COVID-19. Every metric and everything that we've been accustomed to learning, forget whether we're going to have to convert to the metric system, we're going to have to convert to a COVID-19 system after this. And if you look to the chart to the right there that I have of the jobless claims, this is a perfect example. Look at how tame and flat it was in the 250 to less than 300,000 range almost forever, it seems like, post recovery from 2009. And then this huge spike. Terry made an important comment in his opening remarks about making sure that even your 1099 employees understand that in the CARES Act, this ability to apply for benefits and unemployment is a first ever event. So part of the reason that our jobless claims have spiked so much to 9.9 million over the last 2 weeks is that this is the first time ever we've included 1099 employees and sole proprietors. And so we're not comparing apples to apples anymore. So when we come out of this thing, we're going to have some work to do to understand and put things in perspective. And our ruler may not be long enough to, show the full perspective here. So I put 3 metrics up there at the top to kind of highlight this change. I might have mentioned last week the TSA passenger throughput count. This is going to be a very good forward-looking metric to keep in mind as we stand this economy back up and we come out of shelter in place. So the first week of March, we were running 2.3 million people a day through our airports in TSA. That fell at the end of March to 150,000. It's less than 100,000 today. When we lift these orders, it's going to be interesting to see how many of us return to travel. And it'd be important to watch that to see whether we get back to 1 million, 1.5 million, or anywhere close to 2 million again. Because if we don't, it's going to be much more predictive of more dire situation for our hotels and tourism and retail industry. And you guys in Florida, in particular, Miami and your cruise ship business, and Orlando with the theme parks and everything else. Second one, I just talked about the jobless claims. They're distorted because it's the first time ever we've allowed 1099 and sole proprietors to apply for benefits. The third one, on top of this whole crisis, we have this energy thing going on between Russia and China and OPEC. And I want to put in perspective a number. So our demand for oil, while we've been sheltering in place and idling everything, has dropped by 30 million barrels a day. That is the equivalent of all of the production output in a day by Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the United States. That is a mind-boggling figure. So when you think about your CCM colleagues in the energy states in Texas, this, on top of the COVID crisis, this energy situation is very dire for them. In the lower left, I put the ADP numbers that were a week ago tomorrow. And as you can see, with 2 exceptions, really everybody lost jobs. And ADP is tracking the private payroll. So this is real time. This is not a survey. It's one of the best predictive real-time measures that process more payrolls than any company in America. And so the two that were growing were manufacturing, the limited manufacturing that were involved with converting to masks or ventilators or uh, PPE equipment. The other was education and healthcare. Obviously, we knew that. They're put under tremendous strain. We've had to do tremendous hiring there. Everyone else lost jobs. We get that. Go over to the right side. This is the BLS jobs numbers from last week that I want you to put in perspective. Note the the second and third bullet points. You noted that our unemployment rate, the U3, I prefer the U6, but the U3, the one we all follow in the media, went from 3.5 to 4.4%. Does that kind of correlate with almost 10 million jobless claims? Of course it doesn't. Part of the reason is if you're receiving any kind of paid leave benefit from your employer, you're ineligible to file for a claim yet. So we usually see a lag here until those unemployment severance benefits from your company burn off, then you're eligible. So we're going to see a tremendous lag in the unemployment number. It will move dramatically in when we get the April and May numbers. So put that in perspective. The media took the headline that it was the single greatest 1 month move overall. And that's true, 90 basis points, but still the number's relatively low. So it was the largest increase since 1975 in a 1 month move. The labor participation rate, I think, is actually now understated at 63%. I think with everybody working at home, we might be at 93% labor participation rate in terms of how productive we all are and doing Zoom meetings and all of that type of stuff. So it's showing that that hasn't changed a lot. Employment in the leisure and hospitality took the greatest hit, almost 500,000 jobs last month. It's going to get worse. Government was creating jobs. That's to be expected with the response to the virus. The shocker measure, though, is at the bottom. Average hourly earnings went up. They went up 0.4% or 11 cents an hour. And that might strike people as weird if we have that many jobless claims and idled hospitality and retail workers. And the answer is they're idled, their wages are taken out of the equation. And what we have left with is higher earning wage workers that are distorting this figure. Wages did not go up. The population that we're calculating it from is now more skewed towards higher wage earning people like ourselves that are able to work at home and do a Zoom meeting, and we're not working at a hotel or in hospitality or retail. So those are the big ones I wanted to bring your attention to. Let's advance to the next slide. So this one is not all the news is terrible. We need to remind ourselves it's not terrible. So this is on the retail side. So e-commerce sales are up 25%. We've had a 62% surge in online pickup in the store. Grocery, now I want you to put in perspective. A year ago, we were seeing total online retail sales around 10%. And we were seeing the beginning of this year, that number rise to around 12 to 14%. Just grocery online sales now represent almost what total online retail sales did just a little over a year ago, 8% up from 6% 3 years ago. That's mind-boggling. The acceleration of online grocery that we were seeing kind of go with Amazon buying Whole Foods and then Target was shipped and Walmart's growth, it's on steroids, and I don't think we're turning back. Online apparel, we saw a drop. We're seeing a lot of consumer discretion that could be online drop. And the reason is entities like Amazon have said they're not restocking their warehouses with non-essential items. They're only restocking with essential. So any of you that's tried to order something like we ordered a game for my son on his Switch, and it took 5 to 7 days to get here that normally would have been the next day. Hand sanitizer, gloves, masks, PPE are up over 800%. Look at toilet paper, up 231%. The next one you're going to see is, unfortunately, this morning, I read a story about how our meat processing and packing plants are now experiencing workers with outbreak of the COVID. In fact, the largest meat packing plant in Arkansas yesterday and revealed today has an outbreak and is going to have to idle or slow down the meat packing processing. So we may find that we have beef shortages as well as toilet paper. Please, though, don't go out and stockpile beef if you can get it at your store. It doesn't last as long as toilet paper. And if we all just take 1 or 2 pounds, then there's enough for all of us. Look what's happening with fitness equipment sales. We can't go to the gym anymore. We can't go out and exercise in public. So we're going online and we're ordering fitness equipment. My wife's even doing her Zumba online. They have online Zoom Zumba sessions. So she's needed some new, hand weights and whatnot. So we ordered those online. Electronic sales, these aren't games and things for our kids. This is you and me as professionals. We're ordering things like green screens for our Zooms. We're ordering special backlight things so that our Zoom meetings and webinars are better. And then the last one, look at home gardening. So during World War II, a lot of us may not have realized how much of our fruit and vegetable production in the United States came from home gardens. They were called victory gardens. The statistic I found this over the weekend was 40% of our consumed vegetables, fruits and vegetables between 1940 and 45 came from home gardening. That's absolutely amazing. So we're seeing that's up 12%. Seed sales, stuff at the garden centers, all that stuff, tomato plants, good luck trying to find them. So these are some neat highlights I found on Adobe Analytics, or our Acre team did, Adobe Analytics, their digital economic index. So this is a good one where it's not all bad news. Let's advance to the next slide. And it's not all bad in hotel. This is a story that appeared yesterday in the Dallas Business Journal and on Connect Media about a architectural firm in Dallas that has figured out how to very efficiently and cost effectively convert hotels in 10 days to 14 days into hospitals or COVID care facilities. And so here's an opportunity for us as CCIMs. Just the fact that someone wants to convert one of these or utilize them doesn't mean we have to connect the dot. We can't connect the dots. We're going to need skill set from our brokers and CCIMs with skill sets to understand the tentacles that go to your insurance, that go into how are you going to re-FF&E the hotel converted, say, from a Sheraton to a COVID-19 Keratin. Do you really think guests are going to want to travel back to that hotel 6-12 months from now, not assured that the mattresses and linens have not all been replaced? So that's going to be a capital hit. So we're going to need the expertise of CCIMs and brokers to help guide property owners through this situation where FEMA or local state agencies want to utilize their hotel for a COVID care type facility. So this is an opportunity for CCIMs engaging. You guys in Florida are probably going to be front and center right there along with Las Vegas and New York and parts of California. So you've got tremendous hotel assets throughout the state, South Florida, Central Florida, all of those. So that's an opportunity. We'll advance the next slide. So this is a neat one. This should be a really encouraging slide for all of us that are trying to figure out the debt pieces of this virus by property type. My friend Jim Costello with Real Capital Analytics held a webinar last week, provided this slide along with several other really good ones. And this one looks at stratifying the debt that is held by lender source by property type. And you'll see at the top there, I've got 2 yellow arrows outlined in red, one to apartment and one to hotel. Look at the one on the left, noting to government agencies. This is Freddie, Fannie, HUD, the government-sponsored enterprises, the GSEs. 93% of all multifamily loans on properties in this country are held by the GSEs. We knew it was a lot. We all wondered why they jumped in first to offer loan forbearance if you gave rent forbearance to your tenants. Here's why. The one entity that could be absolutely decimated again, remember, these were the entities that had to be put into conservatorship in 2010, early 2010 when I was at the Fed, when they only held 1% capital. So they've never emerged. They've generated a lot of profits. So this is the entity that holds the multifamily stuff. But look at hotel. I've got it circled in black there, in case you're colorblind like me with the distinguishing the shades of orange or brown. Here's the good news on hotel. No one entity holds, like a multifamily, all of the debt. It's pretty stratified, whether it's CMBS, financial, life insurance entities, you name it, the hotel debt is spread out. And what that means is for your hotel clients, with nobody that's going to possibly be completely decimated like the GSEs were in 2009 and 10 for multifamily debt, nobody's going to be completely wiped out with hotel debt. This means your clients are going to have much better wiggle room or opportunity with their borrowers to work through the problem because no one's going to be completely wiped out. So this is really encouraging news on the hotel side, and you can look at the other property types there. But I think good news on the hotel side to share there. Next slide. So this is a piece that I wrote last week in my Wednesday Insight called Dem Bones, and I broke it into 3 parts. You know, the sequencing that we have to do. So if you think about that skeleton and, you know, putting the bones back together so it stands up again, there's first how we deal with the virus, there's dealing with the intervention, and then we'll deal with the supply chain. So the virus, you know, some bones or aspects of our economy, like travel and entertainment, they may never fully recover. And that's something for you in Florida with so much of your industry and your economy tied to whether it's, you know, cruise ship or theme parks or tourism overall and your beaches. There's some entities and aspects of this that just are not going to recover. However, new economic tissue will emerge, and not all is going to be lost. So we're going to see, just like we saw CMBS 2.0 created after CMBS shut down in 2009. I was at the New York Fed during that, and we had to stand it up again at the New York Fed with the help of TREP. We're going to see logistics 2.0. We are going to get rid of all of the 1980s vintage textbooks in business school that talk about just-in-time supply management. We're going to change that completely. We're going to have the evolution of telemedicine, and what does that look like, and what kind of real estate is utilized on that. It may mean there's a whole new use for branch banks that could be telemedicine facilities. Remote everything. So, you know, think about what's been happening with online grocery. We've completely accelerated that. I also think that the millennial and Generation Z will point back to this period of time like our grandparents, my father, did to World War II in Pearl Harbor. We know that it was costly and it took years to recover. I don't think this is something we recover from in quarters. I think we are looking at more like a double dip type recession, where once we open up the economy, we see some lift, but then we slip back into recession when we realize the full extent of the carnage and damage. Like 50,000 retail stores closed in the last 8 weeks, but there always will be new growth, just like pruning plants. The 2 charts on the right, some of you have seen the top right one. Those of you that I presented to in January and February in Miami and Pennsylvania and Austin and the Carolinas, remember this, where I was queuing up early in the year how important it was we focus on our fiscal state. We entered this virus heading into another $1 trillion a year deficit. The first time we'd done that since 2009. And did we really need to have that kind of deficit spending with a much more healthy economy than 2009? And I was trying to drive home which states had their fiscal house in order that would be in better shape to capitalize on the growth of our economy or any disruption that we may have. And you'll note I highlighted, I think shared this down in Miami in mid-January, Florida ranked number 4 in terms of the most fiscally balanced states in the country. Who are some of the worst? Illinois, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, I'll get to in a minute. So go down to the lower graph below that. This is a map that's produced by the National Council of Legislatures, and this was by the Pew Center for Trust and Research. So the Pew looked at this and just updated this for March, and they looked at what are the total balances that states have, including their rainy day funds and extra cash sitting around not spent to survive, you know, no revenue and having to continue government operations. And you can see that the average for the country is 48 days. Not bad. And that's the best it's been since going back to 2007-06 timeframe. So Florida's pretty good in there at over 40 days. So who's some of the worst? Pennsylvania. They only have 4 hours of balances to operate their state, 0.3 of 1 day. Illinois, less than 5 days. Kentucky, less than 10 days. So who are the best states? I've got them over there in that paragraph on the left with the highlighted in blue. And Florida's in there. The best is Wyoming, Oregon, and Texas. Wyoming has over 397 days. They could shut down, receive no revenue, and make it for more than a year. And then you've got Oregon and Texas. And imagine this with Texas. Texas at over 100 days with no state income tax. I say to keep this in perspective, because as we go forward and we need more intervention and more stimulus to get through this, look at which states are in positions to do that and which ones aren't to help save its businesses and its commercial real estate. Let's go on to the next slide. So this one shows, also piggybacking on that, from the National Conference of State Legislators, who's got plans that they've already passed or pending or who have done nothing. So the dark green means they've already passed intervention so far. And some of those are states that are being impacted by the virus now. Others in the light green with hash marks have both past stuff and they have new pending things. All right, now Florida, I'm gonna pick on you guys for a minute. Down there at the bottom with the red arrow. Early in this virus, Florida's legislature decided to pass a state resolution 1934 that declared Florida State University Seminoles as the NCAA basketball team champion when they canceled the tournament. Now, nothing against Florida State. My daughter's in grad school there, but I imagine you University of Florida and Miami fans maybe aren't so happy that the legislature singled out Florida State, maybe because they're headquartered there near the state capitol. But anyway, I thought that was a little funny one. They have passed serious legislation on mitigation, but that was one of the first ones. I think Florida was the first one to declare one of its state universities as the NCAA basketball champions. So over there on the left, our Fed intervention is not done. Fortunately, Congress is not in session until April 20th to spend another few $1 trillion when they come back. Get ready for another $1, $2, or $3 trillion CARES 2.0 legislation. What I want you to take away from what I've been setting up here is we need to focus our elected representatives on stimulus and rescue and intervention that focuses on our needs rather than our wants. CARES 2.0, first one, 1.0, had a lot of wants in there, almost $1 trillion of stuff, everything from the Kennedy Center on down. We can't afford to do that. And if you look at the fiscal situation in our states, we can see the states can't do that either. So let's advance to the next slide. So this is where them bones come together with the supply chain. So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to throw out all the 1980s textbooks about just-in-time inventory supply chain management. We're going to replace that. We're realizing that everything made in China is maybe not a good plan. Does it mean nothing's made in China? No. But it means that we don't have all of our masks and all of our pharmaceutical and all of our critical manufacturing done in a country that maybe isn't even hospitable to us or care for us. So that's going to mean more manufacturing coming back to the US. That means our supply chain is going to have to step up further. We're going to have to figure out how to supply those factories and the materials that are needed. And it's not just going to be auto parts and things that go into a Walmart. We're going to be unveiling how things connect and enable rapid transmission of the coronavirus. So I'm going to share with you with an example that this isn't an urban legend. This is the hypothesis that's being validated right now. How did Europe get the coronavirus? The hypothesis is China over the last few years went into Italy and acquired many of the luxury retail, clothing, apparel, leather goods, you name it, companies and manufacturers and retail brands. And they didn't want to lose the value of those brands and those products by moving the production to China and then it being made in China rather than Italy. So what China did is they moved over 100,000 workers to northern Italy to overtake and run those factories and those businesses that they acquired. So what happened is sometime early last December, those workers took leave and were headed back to China for the Chinese New Year. When the New Year got canceled, they all had been exposed and they went back to northern Italy, and that's how they believe the transmission became so rampant in Italy that is now spreading to Spain and the rest of the world. We're going to have to think more than just cheap labor and cheap materials. We're also going to have to think about health safety, food safety, all of those type things in our supply chain management. Over on the right, there are a lot of supply bones that are in disarray. And the intricacy of the movement of our supply chain from ports to rail to trucking and distribution warehouses is coming into focus. We're really making it difficult for our truckers, where all the rest stops on the interstates are closed, where the restrooms and being able to enter truck stops are closed. Truck stops are not set up for drive-through takeout food with their trailer and their tractor all connected together. So truckers are having a very difficult time. And when they get to the warehouses aren't letting them exit their cabs, use a restroom, get a cup of coffee. So we've got to think through all of these type of things in our supply chain. And if you look at the bottom there, my favorite indices, the Association of American Railroads, they just produced their March report, and it showed that the decline in overall rail count and intermodal was the worst ever since they've been tracking data going back to 1988. So we should expect that instinctively when you shut down global manufacturing and the global supply chain. But monitor this going back, because as we start to have intermodal containers move again and ships come into our ports, we're going to see a whole different supply chain emerge. This morning, there was a great piece in, well, it was Forbes or the Journal of Commerce that talked about Port Laredo in Texas just surpassed LA and Long Beach as the port handling the most containers. The connectivity through Mexico and all has become very important as China has shut down. So we're going to see ports in our logistics like Laredo, like Port Freeport near Houston in Texas, like Mobile, which just completed its terminal expansion the end of March here to facilitate more from Walmart as its Gulf Coast supply chain. So from a Florida standpoint, do not let your legislatures take their eye off the ball on the importance of your ports. Appreciate that you guys have an inland empire in Central Florida in Lakeland there that has really become to Florida in its supply chain what the Inland Empire in California and LA became to the rest of the country. So keep an eye on that. The piece of the transformer, that's a logistics transformer we designed at Acre, the picture, where we wanted people to visualize it's not just about ports or roads and bridges, it's about the trucking, it's about the rail, it's about the air cargo, those are wings at the top. There's the link to our paper if you want to look at that. We published that over a year ago. We'll probably update that on how the coronavirus has rechanged or brought us to logistics infrastructure 2.0. Let's go to the next slide. So this is getting near the end. I wanted you to realize this. The Johns Hopkins Hospital and University website is I think, the best go-to resource that has everything going on, the real numbers updated around the world. What I want you to realize is a week ago tomorrow, right, we had 860,000 cases worldwide. You know, I took this yesterday or the day before, it was up over 1.3 million. And it's amazing that we have the most cases in the world. I think that may be understated because I think all of us are struggling with testing. We may be now doing a better job on testing and capturing more of it. But when you think about it and you look at where China is way down there with less than 100,000 cases, confirmed cases today, and that they were the source point of this, and look at what's happened to Europe. I explained Italy and Spain to you, and look at us. Think of what our numbers might look like if the president hadn't intervened and shut down the travel between the US and China at the end of January. And think of if we had understood that linkage to Italy between China, what we might have done to shut things down with Europe sooner. So this is a great website to look at. Engage in what if thinking on this. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is the end. I want to close on one couple of points here. So there's some good news for you guys in Florida. If you will track on your Florida FEMA site, emergency management site, they are tracking the cases. And over the weekend, you guys had 2 consecutive days where the number of cases and deaths actually declined. So there's some encouraging news for you there in Florida. I do want to close because we're talking about forecasting and speculation on what's going to happen and how it's going to play out. My number one forecast here is that we probably see a W recession, a double dip. We're in a steep one now. This will be the first part of the W. It'll be steeper than the second part. As we open things back up, hopefully over the summer, I think that when we realize the carnage in other areas, there's going to be a lot of holes that we have to fill. We've closed 50,000 stores, and 25% of all small businesses have already closed. So they will not have an opportunity to really benefit from this stimulus. So a lot of carnage that we're going to have to stand back up. So I think we'll have a more of a W type of double dip recession here rather than a V-shaped here. I don't think we're in a depression. I think I covered last time the difference between a recession and a depression. The depression, you got to have over 10% unemployment, over 10% contraction in GDP, and have that over an extended period of time of 3 years. That's not where we're going. So I want to close on a quote from Winston Churchill in 1940, November 12, 1940, when everybody was trying to ask the questions, what's going to happen? How are we going to do? Are we going to be prepared? Can we win the battle? And he knew that anybody's response or forecast was just that. It was speculative. So here's the quote he gave that I think we all should keep in mind. It is not given to human beings, happily for them, for otherwise life would be intolerable, to foresee or to predict to any large extent the unfolding course of events. All our forecasts are speculation. We're all doing the best we can. I'm trying to give you forward-looking things. I'm trying to give you some kinds of encouragement where things might evolve and change to, because we all need a little bit of hope, and we all need to be, as I've said, looking up and forward to find that light at the end of the tunnel. And we can only do that if we really engage in what if thinking. What if this happens? What do I do next? So I'll stop there, Terry, and see if we have any questions or if we have any time. About 10 minutes here.
Casey, I just want to thank you for an excellent presentation. I want to thank our sponsors, NAI Global and Wells Fargo, and the Florida CCIM chapter, and all those people that work so hard to put this on. What a great presentation, and we're now open for Q&A. And I have a question, and this question has been coming in on our chat screen throughout the entire presentation about, can we get copies of the slides? Can we get the recording of the session? And the answer to both questions is yes. CCIM Institute will post this on their website as they did last week's presentation. So the entire presentation will be available to you. It's being recorded, and also the slides will be available to you. So I know it's a great presentation. It's something that you can't absorb in a few minutes, so it will be available. Are there other questions? I only see the one question coming in. So a couple of questions just came in from TGI Mac, and he wants to know about the ripples from cabin fever on restaurants, hotels, and travel. No staycations this year. And that's a great question, particularly with regards to Florida.
It is. So my best advice would be maybe you all need to adopt the Georgia's Governor Kemp to be a co in charge. Our governor in Georgia just opened up the beaches. He said people need to get out and walk and enjoy the fresh air, and salt air can't be any worse for you than the virus. So he opened up from Savannah, Georgia, our limited coastlines. I know you guys had to take a more serious measure with the spring breakers and everything going on. So, the cabin fever, some things that we've tried to do, and I know our neighbors, is those restaurants that we want to patronize and see go. They're either offering takeout or delivery and leave it at your front door if you prepay or pick up. I think there's things we can do there on the restaurants. I was in a conversation earlier this morning about experiential retail and how it was all the rage the last few years, and it's probably going to be the most decimated type of retail. So the cabin fever, we all have to, as hard as it is, abide by the shelters in place so we don't spread this thing or we pick it up and bring it home to family. It's tough in states like Florida or Nevada or, where you got the casinos or, your destination places. This is going to be very, very tough. I don't think there are any answers. The decimation is going to be terrible. I'm worried about the summer vacation season. I know, everybody in the inland areas of the South and Midwest love to pack up and go to your Florida and Gulf Coast beaches in the summer. Hotels that I'm checking with, they're closed until June 1st. So the next 2 months, we're not going to have in university towns. So think about, for your universities with the University of Florida and Florida State and Tallahassee, as much as 30 to 50% of the revenue from retailers comes during the 3-week period surrounding commencement. So university towns are really going to be hit hard. So you guys have a double whammy. Not only do you have the destinations like the theme parks, you have the cruise ship industry decimated, you have the airports closed, you have the travel between Latin America. I wish I could tell you there's just a lot of good news. It's not. And I think Florida is going to be one of those places that's going to take some extraordinary intervention, just like Nevada, probably New York, and some other destination type places. So I don't have a good, easy answer. We all need to do our bit. The longer we can be disciplined and abide by the shelter in place orders, hopefully the quicker this thing bends, and then we can get the facilities open, or we can find if some of these medications and drug therapies, I know a lot are. I'm personally familiar with one that's worked in our family. So there is hope out there, but the economic carnage here is going to be really difficult. You're going to be one of those states that takes it very, very hard. You're going to need more intervention.
I have an excellent question from Joe Palaio that he's asking about the 80% potential default rate in rent from retailers and shopping centers. Our shopping centers are in trouble already. What will happen to shopping centers?
Yeah, so it's going to be a very bifurcated thing. So the CEO yesterday of the owner that owns Hudson Yards, blanking on I want to say retail, the related companies. So he was on CNBC yesterday and actually shared some encouraging news. He said that in April, so this isn't March, this is for April, the first weekend, on all their properties, even with New York and New Jersey and their multifamily, 88% of the rent was collected. 95% of all commercial, including retail, if you back out the hotel stuff. So I think the retailers that have been able to get some sort of assistance, whether it's rent abatement for a period of time, like the small example I shared with you in a podcast for CCIM, or they're going to hopefully take advantage of these small business loans and whatnot. The banks are trying to set up a program that should take 6 months to a year to do in like 6 hours to 6 days. So the money's not going to flow out. My concern is these retailers just can't make it that long. So if we're now looking at 4 to 8 weeks to get the money from entities that have already been sheltered in place for 4 weeks, like I said, we've already lost 25,000, and most of those are restaurant type businesses. So I don't know if I answered the question, but there's not an easy answer. I think you just have to communicate with the property owner, communicate with the lender. And I've shown it as a really simple example in my own neighborhood doing that, and looking at other alternatives. Like we went to a credit union because the bank didn't yet have or understand the FDIC's loan modification clarification to the banks. So this is where I think CCIMs can help, is encouraging. One of the best tools we have is communication right now. Communicate with your customers, communicate with your clients. If they don't know how to connect with somebody, let us know, or we can be the entities and the vessels through the ccim.com/COVID-19 resource page. There's all kinds of great cross-pollinated stuff, or send me an email, and through my banking relationships or whatever else, I'll be glad to try to help in any way.
Thanks, Casey. I have a question from Josh. How do you think this will affect commercial lending?
So a couple of thoughts. The existing stuff, so if you've got a construction loan or if you've got an existing loan, those things are really going to continue forward. The banks don't want to see construction stop. It's more disruptive and more costly to do that. They have a commitment. They've been told by the regulators to keep going. Banks have been much better behaved this time than 2009 by not collapsing or contracting open lines of credit and even expanding those. So those are all good. As far as new lending activity, it's going to be impacted, probably most severely by the banks. Think about what the banks are having to do with their resources right now. Everyone I know that's in a major bank that was a CRE lender is learning and dealing with the small SBA PPP program right now and lending hands in any way that they can. So they're not really looking at a lot of new packages or responding. Where I do see commercial lending still active is in the life company world and the credit union world. So in Alabama, we have a CCIM Alabama webinar on Thursday, and one of the people we're going to have on our town hall is Steve Kleikus from Protective Life. It's headquartered in Birmingham, but it's owned by a Japanese life company, Daiichi. And he shared with us, I'll share with you in advance, that they are not shut down. They are continuing to look at packages, assess them, make commitments, follow through on commitments. So I think it's going to be very selective. I think the banks are overburdened with other responsibilities and not really looking to add a ton to their new portfolio, and they're dealing with SBA and how to help with small business lending. The credit unions are a great source. If you got something under 10 million bucks, especially under 5 million, talk to a credit union. They are not overburdened. They do have capital. They are member owned. The life companies, don't just think of the big ones like a MetLife or a Prudential. Think about those that are downstream that are doing lending. There's a lot of them in the Midwest. There's Protective Life in Alabama. They are doing deals, but these are probably going to be 50 to max 60% LTV deals. So you're going to need equity. Equity is out there to come in. There's tons of equity that's looking for opportunities here to step in. So I'll give you an example. I'm on a board of directors for a public REIT. It's Monmouth. We do all industrial and warehouse. We closed on a deal just a week ago that we had queued up, didn't retrade the deal, didn't ask for any changes, done deal. We have a pipeline that's active. We have cash on hand to look at deals. We're having deals presented to us that big funds that are now out of balance, that maybe now because of the decline in values or impairment accounting issues, now industrial is too high of a ratio in their portfolio and they need to rebalance it. So they're walking from really good industrial deals. And they might have a $5 or $10 million deposit up and they're walking from that, and the developer is able to use that to reduce the price. So deals that 2 months ago, even a month ago, were at 5 cap rate deals are now 6 or higher with a lower price. So equity is out there. Again, it's why you got to communicate. Life company debt is active. They're not decimated. Most of the hotel exposure they have is through CMBS, where they bought, participations in CMBS offerings. It's not a lot of deals. But the banks are overwhelmed with having to deal with the programs in the intervention and SBA program. And then on the small deals, look at credit unions. But it's going to take a hit. The numbers are going to be pretty staggering. I think we'll see commercial lending. We'll begin to get the bank earnings next week. So it starts April 14th with the big banks, JP Morgan, Citi, et cetera. Watch those earnings next week on the 14th. The banks will be giving you forward guidance as to what's happening. And you'll see that new loan origination is really diving in the bank world. And they'll give you some guidance on that. So really pay attention to these earnings. Next week, April 14th, all the banks will be reporting that whole week. So pay attention to it.
I have a question from Datvu, and he asks, how can small businesses put themselves in a better position after this corona, or for that matter, during this corona?
So I'm going to go back. I'm going to really date myself. So I grew up in Colorado. My father was a ski resort developer during the Volcker era when he took interest rates to 21%. One of my early jobs was at Equitable Real Estate. They decided to give me the worst performing geographies, the oil patch. So I got Colorado and Texas in the late 80s to manage. And as I came out of that, and later in my career, over the next 5 to 10 years, when we looked at businesses and we looked at developers and that it had an issue, we basically said if it was during the oil patch days or if you were out of Texas, all forgiven. We want to look at how you behaved up until that point and subsequently. I think it's a reset button for small businesses. I think you have to realize everybody understands what happened to you. It wasn't of your choice. It wasn't of your doing. You avail yourself to everything you possibly can, but it's going to be a reset button. And I think we're going to lose somewhere between a third and a half of all of our small businesses during this crisis. They're going to have to recapitalize, reconstitute, and come back. And I think that the financial world is going to recognize this as an extraordinary time. They're not going to hold it as a penalty against you any more than we did those businesses in Texas and Colorado in the oil patch states in the 80s. it's going to be a reset button. For a small business owner, I think it's a matter of, number one, cash prioritization every day. Figure out what you have to pay and what you don't have to pay. So if you need utilities on to keep doing takeout orders, if you need to keep the chef, but you can't pay, say, the waitress help, you have to each day make those decisions as to what do I have to keep, what do I have to pay, and what unfortunately do I have to let go. It's survival instincts at this point for small business. And it starts with understanding how much cash you have and what you have to prioritize. Pay the utilities, pay the cook, pay the kid, or you drive yourself to do the delivery, and everything else has to get cut. Pay your suppliers so you can get, the food and the food materials. But for small business, it's survival. I think if you're in experiential retail, like a gym or, a climbing wall or, something cool and hip, knife throwing or, axe throwing, I think was the other one in a restaurant, you're probably, unfortunately, in very, very serious and dire shape. I don't think you come back from this. I think it's going to be a recapitalization. So prioritize the cash, figure out what you have to pay. It's kind of like what I'm telling the government. Give us help with what we need, not what we want. As a small business, do what you need, not what you want to do.
Casey, I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think we need to cut expenses, but also avail yourselves of the programs that are available. The Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. But most importantly, cut your expenses anywhere that you can and try and keep your businesses viable. Barbara asks, first she says she wants to thank you for an excellent presentation. And she wants to know, Casey, when the next presentation will be. And I'm going to let you answer that, or we could direct that to one of our people.
Yeah, I'll direct it back. My understanding is I'm making myself available on a weekly basis if these lunch and chat or lunch and learn type things are helpful. As things are unfolding, there's so much changing every day, every week. I'm glad to do this each week going forward as long as it's helpful and productive. And I really defer to your Florida CCIM leadership to make that call and that determination. Please give your feedback to them so they know if this is helpful. If not, then they'll pivot to something else that can help you. So won't offend my feelings, but I've made myself available each Tuesday going forward as long as this is helpful.
And we do appreciate that, Casey, and love your presentations. I have a final question from Dan Casey, and it's a great question. You spoke briefly about it, but warehouse and manufacturing sectors, he feels like it sounds from your presentation like there'll be significant expansion as industries bring production back home and abandon just-in-time supply. Any ideas when that might happen, Casey, and how significant the expansion might be here in the United States?
No, it's spot on. It's happening now. So one of the things we're going to discover is, how Amazon conditioned us that we all need to have these 1 million square foot mega e-commerce fulfillment centers? Guess what they're already discussing? Maybe that's too big. So that if we have a virus or we have a contamination or we have some public health or whatnot, maybe we should have more smaller distributions rather than these big mega 1 million, where you have to shut the whole darn thing down. You have to recontaminate every box in the facility, et cetera. So it's happening now. I'll give you, I can't identify, it's a major national brokerage, and they've had to deal with tough decisions. Most of their brokers are 1099 employees. What they've done, though, is all the executives have taken pay cuts. They forewent all of their 401k matching contributions. Everybody agreed to also forego any of their calendar year 2019 bonuses that were going to be paid in March. And they use that to keep medical stuff going. But what they told me was they have redeployed almost all of their retail team and their office team into industrial and food services. The calls they're getting from every major food service entity or supplier is off the charts. Where can you find me cold storage so I can do some more supply chain to supply my grocery stores? If you can't find the actual cold storage, where can you find me a building and then connect me with a contractor that can put in makeshift cold storage. I shared with many of you a year ago and in San Diego, this idea of tent warehouses by a company out of Iowa called ClearSpan. They're off the charts in terms of busy. You can put these things up in 60 to 90 days. They can put cold storage in part of them. It is already happening now. And the shift, like I shared with you on Port Laredo, we're seeing these things already shift and move around. We're seeing plants. You look at a Gap that has shifted from making apparel to making masks. We've seen pharmaceutical on the Georgia-South Carolina line in Augusta, Georgia and South Carolina, where they had closed a former medical equipment supply business because it all went to China. They've reopened it in 30 days, and now they're making all kinds of protective personal equipment stuff. It is already happening. The paper that we wrote a year ago on adaptive reuse, I would encourage all to go back and read it because municipalities are more attentive now to understanding the need to how to repurpose, whether it's a hotel for medical use, whether it's a mall for maybe manufacturing, closed department store. They're wide open to any of these ideas. They're waiving everything. Our governor in Georgia here just waived all permits and inspections for construction or construction of converting assets to another purpose related to assistance in the COVID battle. So it's happening now. And when we come out of this, we're going to see, like I said, logistics and manufacturing 2.0. We're going to throw away this just-in-time supply management theory. We're going to throw away the manuals that said chase cheap labor around the world. And we're really going to start to factor in risk management factors into the logistics infrastructure. It's happening now.
Casey, I want to thank you for an excellent presentation. We look forward to next week, and we'll keep our members informed about our next presentation. We've been having these regularly now on Tuesdays. This was our second presentation with Casey. You know, I might just add that a little comment about the regional warehouses. Our company did a small transaction with Amazon on 70,000 square feet. So I look for more of that to happen. You know, these smaller regional distribution warehouses rather than the gigantic million square foot. We do have a huge million square foot Walmart and a CVS warehouse in our neck of the woods. But I look for more of these, you know, 70,000, 100,000 square foot type facilities as online grows. And so I think that that's something to really look at from a commercial real estate point of view, particularly you industrial folks out there. Thank you so much.
You're spot on, Terry. If you'd encourage them, if there's topics or issues or questions you have that you would like for queue up for next week, shoot them into your CCIM Florida leadership. And so we plan to have one next week. We wait, kind of almost my fault on this one if they got the communication out late. I really almost wanted to wait till Friday to see what was happening in the jobs numbers. Things are breaking so much that we could put 5 bullets together today that are completely obsolete by next Monday. But if there's things you need answered or topics you want to address, shoot them to your leadership and we'll try to put those in the next Tuesday session.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure you get them, Casey. And again, thanks for the excellent presentation.
Thank you. Everybody be safe.